It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duts. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague, who I would never leave out of a hype video. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Oh, how topical.
Thank you. Thank you. For those who are unaware, as most teams usually do, after the Super Bowl, they readied themselves with a hype video for the next year. The Dallas Cowboys did such a thing and forgot to include their quarterback.
As I say, so many ways we could take that. I mean, it's probably better than the Eagles hype video, which I did catch earlier, and it was a bucket of shit.
True. But by the way, the Dallas Cowboys want us to just a complete mistake and nothing to read into. The fact that your most, recognisable player was not in a video hyping next season.
Well, the thing is,
mistake.
As we know, this decision obviously hasn't been made by high-level executives because the high-level executives of the Dallas Cowboys all take off to Mexico for 3 months once the Super Bowl finished.
They're all on a yacht, aren't they? Just on the coast.
We know this didn't come from Jarrett or Steven, so...
No, Jarrett and Steven are hard at work as we speak, grinding tape.
Grinding
something else. Neither which are coffee beans or tape. But we don't want to get sued, so let's move on. Neil, this week it's a Super Bowl recap. We will review briefly, give our thoughts, and then go from there. And then, unfortunately, we got to talk about 3 incredible losses, 2 personal and 1 major influence in the NFL. All 3 major influences in the NFL, but one of them a head coach. And we wanted to talk about all 3 of them again, in the case of Chris Wesseling. But obviously also Terez Paylor, who's also been on the show, and then finally Marty Schottenheimer. But before we do that, Neil, let's look at the Super Bowl. As we all predicted, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers absolutely dominated the Kansas City Chiefs, who didn't score an effing touchdown. One day, Neil, what we'll remember in this game of it's now all about throwing is dominating lines, both offensive and defensive lines, tend to win games. And by Jove, on Sunday, did they, as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on offensive line and defensive line absolutely dominated the Kansas City Chiefs.
The point could be made, and smarter people than me can back me up or poo-poo this theory as they will, but you could advance the theory that if you have a high-powered passing offense, protecting your quarterback could be an asset. I'm prepared to be proved wrong, but for now I will stick to this thesis that maybe going up against a aggressive defensive front like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you don't really want an offensive line consisting of the Costco night shift managers Hall of Fame. You actually want some NFL level talent to protect your quarterback.
There's a couple of things on this. Yes, that's true. I believe that if Mike Remmer's team ever gets to the Super Bowl ever again, he will feign an injury, as he was obviously dominated in this game. And the last time he went to the Super Bowl was against Von Miller, where I think he made Von Miller $70 bajillion. And the other thing that I find really frustrating, and it really annoys me about head coaches, is this isn't working. So do you know what we'll do? We'll continue to do exactly the same thing over and over again, because that's what I do. I love Andy, and I do, and I know that his mind was probably elsewhere, and rightfully so, given the situation that had happened with his son earlier in the week. But maybe leave Travis Kelce into block, or maybe put a 6th defensive lineman in there. That would be cool.
We don't really need to go any further onto my thoughts of when Andy gets stuck in a particular mindset,
no,
do we?
Of course.
I think I've made my thoughts on that particular issue abundantly clear over the years.
Especially to me, maybe not always on a podcast, but yes. What I would say is my favourite stat in how much did the Lions dominate was number one. Number one was Patrick Mahomes running for 497 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And also the fact that while you're doing that, what usually happens is you would like your players to make plays. And let's be honest, Patrick Mahomes threw while basically lying down 30 yards and hit people in the face and they didn't catch it.
There's a video on the NFL Top 10s list, which you can find if you have Game Pass. It's on the NFL Originals, and it's the top 10 forgotten plays. And basically, it's plays that happened in a game that have been overshadowed by other plays. So there's Larry Fitzgerald's 75-yard touchdown reception in the Super Bowl. Everyone forgets it because the Santonio Holmes game-winning touchdown. There's selection like that. Patrick Mahomes had at least 3 of the best throws I've ever seen in my life in this game. And unfortunately, anyone who watched Phil Tufnell fielding or trying to catch in the Cats' heyday, you'd know where I'm getting at when they see what the Chiefs receivers were doing. The Super Bowl is not the time, nor is it the place to get dropsy, especially not when your quarterback is running for his life and pulling plays out of every inch of his arse to try and get the team back into it. You letting the ball hit you in the face mask, the numbers, tipping it to someone else to intercept it. It's not going to fly at the best of times. The Super Bowl in that situation, no. Come on. I mean, the Chiefs have essentially been unbeatable for 2 years, so somebody was going to find a way to beat them. To say the Chiefs didn't exactly help themselves would be slightly understating the case.
Yeah, I think we'll get on to that, Neil. Let's stay with the Bucks first, though. I think we've always been comfortable in the knowledge that before this game, Tom Brady was the best quarterback ever, and Gronk was the greatest tight end ever. That was cemented, put in stone, covered in adamantium, covered in cement, put more adamantium on top, because they now are the best in their positions that have ever graced the football field. Yeah,
I mean, Gronk took a year out and was persuaded to return because he wanted to play with Tom Brady again.
He wanted to screw over Bill Belichick. Come on.
I'm not prepared to go down that because I'm not giving, as much. We all know my opinion counts so much, especially in Foxborough. I'm not giving Bill Belichick and his troops the "no one believed in us" motivation that they'll need in 2021, because I'm sure he'll find it for themselves. No, Brady and Gronk has been historically, for the best part of a decade, a cheat code. It's very hard to stop because Gronk, as you say, is a cyborg. And I mean, you look, Chris Godwin did diddly squat in the game. Mike Evans' biggest contribution to the game was being held. And we all want to be held. It's something we all deeply love. It's the companionship that we all seek from our fellow man or woman. But the Super Bowl, it's just a nice time to get held, felled, and cuddled, and it was nice to see. Whereas Gronk and the ground game was it took the Chiefs apart. And and I dare say if they play for another decade, I don't think Travis Kelce's going to, but if Mahomes and Kelce play for the next 3 or 4 years, statistically, Kelce may put up similar numbers to Gronk. It still blows my mind that they're the same age.
It's unbelievable. It kept on bringing up on a podcast, and every single time someone said it, I again had to check Google to make sure it was accurate.
Travis Kelce is the best tight end in the NFL. George Kittle is coming up on the outside. We'll see if there's any young blood to emerge. But in terms of the greatest tight end in the NFL, it's Rob Gronkowski. Unfortunately, that's the way it's going to be.
As we all predicted, the Super Bowl this year was won by Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, Leonard Fournette, and Antonio Brown.
Yeah, most of them I can actually feel some degree of, oh, well, you like to see it. One of them I shall reserve my comments because I think I've made that abundantly clear as well.
Again, I don't like talking about referees, so we're only going to do it briefly. I think with the exception of possibly one, all the other penalties I believe were penalties. What I have an issue with is I'm not particularly interested if I watch a game, i.e. the NFC title game, which is refereed one way, as in WWE wrestling, and then a next one that's refereed like a basketball game where you can't touch anyone.
The problem is, and another sport that you watch, I don't anymore, can attest to this. You want to bring technology in, you want to get perfect decisions. You'll find that imperfect moments have occurred and will affect the perfect decisions. These are human beings making human judgment calls. Some of them will, as with any walk of life, you give someone a rule. Some people will say, that's what it is, that's what I have to do. Other people will say, that's what it says, but what it doesn't say, and that's how they'll take it. Tough titty.
Oh no,
you have to play. You have to play better than the ref's ref. If you're going to get called for holding, here's one thing you can do: stop holding. Yeah. If you're going to get called for pass interference, here's one thing you can do: stop committing pass interference. Because very few of these penalties that were called, very few of them were oh my God, there were no howlers. There were some where it's like, oh, he could have let that go. Why? It's a foul. It says it's a foul. If you're going to let it go, fine. Let's let people get decapitated on the field because it's not within the spirit, but it's in the rules of the game. Don't foul. You don't want to get flagged. Don't foul. It's a simple philosophy, but I'll be conducting seminars and lectures this year, basically like Dr. Rick from the Progressive advert. It'll be, don't want to get called for foul, don't foul. I'm going to charge $35 a ticket, and I'm going to do it on Zoom, and I'm going to make an absolute fortune, because people will come, they'll listen, they'll go away, and they'll still commit fouls.
I agree with you, but dear NFL, when you're picking referees for the Super Bowl, I don't know how you do that. Let's not pick the referee who gives the most penalties as the guy to ref the Super Bowl. How about we pick the guy who gives the least penalties? Because I'm interested in watching the game, not some dude talk. But there you go. Is there a chance of a repeat? If I gave you the option of Tampa Bay versus the Chiefs or the field, what would you take?
I'm going to take the field. As I think Tampa Bay have, they've got some roster jiggery pokery to do. I think there's going to be some people now that, human nature being what it is, they've got their ring and now they want to get paid. And, I think some people will see, also as well, people who've won the Super Bowl, their price tag immediately goes up. The Bucs don't have an awful lot of cap space. So it's a question of they basically are going to have to sell people with the Brady tax and say, look, you can stay for cheaper and you may get another chance at Super Bowl next year, or you can take what's behind door number 2. And door number 2 is the rich multi-year contracts with the big signing on fees for teams that probably aren't as good, but have the money to burn. So, the likes of Chris Godwin. I don't think Gronk's going anywhere. Gronk retires or he plays for the Bucs.
Yeah.
Antonio Brown, I think it's probably in his best interest to stay close to Tom Brady, as he's the one person who seems to keep him quiet. Yeah. Levante David's an interesting one, because obviously you could make the case that he was one of the defensive MVPs. He's obviously been around for a long time with the Bucs. Maybe he thinks got a one chance to cash in. Maybe they'll tag him. I think they're
either going to tag him or Godwin, right?
Well, yeah, and then we have the problem with what happens to Shaq Barrett, because they tagged him last year. It'd be expensive to tag him again, but you can only tag one. It's going to be tough. Plus, as well, we know that the NFC is, by its very nature, a very schizophrenic conference. We've already seen one team that was a quarterback away from being a contender has signed a new quarterback. So straight away, they have to sit up and notice that. There are other teams where you think, well, what are you going to do to get better? Are the Seahawks going to revolutionise their philosophy and stop letting Russell Wilson get hit? He holds the ball too long. Or, are the Packers going to adhere?
If they continue arguing the way they will, they'll be holding the ball too long for a completely different team.
Yeah, you hate to see it. Will the Packers adhere to Aaron Rodgers' requests and actually invest in him the way the Buccaneers invested in Tom Brady? I don't know. Will anyone of any...
Speaking of quarterbacks who may not be with their team more than the next 12 months.
Yeah. Will anyone worth a shit come out of the NFC East? No. So it doesn't really matter. It's hard to say. I just think that we've seen getting to the Super Bowl is tough. Winning the Super Bowl is even harder. And unless you're the New England Patriots, getting back there again and winning it again is now impossible in the modern era. So I will happily take the field. But I back the Chiefs to go back, but not the Bucs.
Yeah, I think the field is sensible. I think it's always difficult to understand where all the cap casualties and the likes are coming from. Although the two teams who got to the Super Bowl aren't in the worst cap situations, they're also not in the best. But we shall see on that. I expect a tag on David. That would probably mean that Godwin and Shaq Barrett are gone. They're massive pieces. So that's something they would have to deal with. I think I'm probably with you that of the two teams, I'd assume the Chiefs are more likely to go back to the Super Bowl than the Bucs. But that would again mean that I've decided against Tom Brady, which one year eventually I will stop doing.
I think we should stress that, considering the air of pessimism we both exhibited earlier in 2020, we got a season, we got a playoffs, we got a Super Bowl. We didn't want that result. But if it was, you can have a Super Bowl and you'll hate the result, or you don't have a Super Bowl at all, I think we'd have made that pact. What happens in the new year is obviously, we've seen what can happen now that we know that, things are going to be affected. So, are we going to have camps? Don't know. OTAs? Probably not. Training camp? Pre-season? We don't know. We've seen, though, that the NFL is prepared to kick so many teams in the balls when it comes to how they will inconvenience them to get the game played. So I think it will take an absolute shocking set of events for the 2021 season to be affected in any way. Whether fans are back, don't know. Will the games come to London? Probably not. Let's get our own house in order before we start worrying about that again.
I'm going to say,
But we have seen that the NFL can cope and get the games played. So hats off to them. Obviously, we know that it wasn't philanthropism or the good of the nation that got these teams to play their 269 games. It was the almighty dollar. But if that's what it took, fingers crossed. Any of the players who tested positive, any of the coaches, the backroom staff, referees, whatnot, hopefully no one suffered any long-term damage. They can continue to lead relatively healthy and happy lives, and we can keep going.
Correct, Neil. And I think it's a good place to stop in the Super Bowl. Obviously, we will now flip over into kind of draft mode going on the next few weeks, get some interviews in and stuff like that. But before we go, this week we've got 3 melancholy happy trails, as Tony Kornheiser would say. The first one, obviously, Neil did a wonderful impromptu pod in relation to Chris Wesseling, who we joke a lot of, friend of the show. We had Wes on 3 times. He knew our names and spoke to us, and it was sad to see him pass away, obviously through cancer. When the last time we had Wes on was March of 2018, which I didn't realise it was that long ago, but it was. He at that point had beaten cancer for the first time. It obviously returned, and him and I were able to discuss that fight, which we had both done and gone through, and succeeded in. Unfortunately, it didn't happen again for Chris, and Lakeisha and Link are now left without a husband and a father. And there is a GoFundMe page, which I would recommend people to go and find. Chris was a brilliant guy, and all I would say is I listen to a lot of different podcasts or shows or whatever, and the amount of heartfelt condolences and discussions about Chris across multiple areas, not just NFL.com, but all over, shows you how much he was loved and respected and how much people are going to miss him. I'm not going to make Neil talk again on Chris because he already did that and did it very well. If we move over, unfortunately, to Terez Paylor, who we had on July of 2019. I remember because we had him on a really weird time for us. It was like 2:00 in the afternoon or something.
July 2020.
Yeah, sorry. July 2020. Terez was really gracious with his time. Obviously, major person within the Kansas City sports scene. Used to write for the Kansas City Star. A member of the Pro Football Writers of America and a voter in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which we discussed with him quite openly and candidly, really. I think in terms of how he thought it went and people that we wondered if he thought would get in, whatever. I know you haven't spoke about Terez yet, Neil, on the podcast, so do you want to give your thoughts on it?
Well, Terez was someone that I was aware of the name, but I came across him on like a crossover pod, as it were, when I think it might have been a Super Bowl or a Combine or the Draft, maybe. It was the Yahoo. It was with Liz, Loza, Matt Harmon, and then they had a pod with Terez and Charles Robinson. So I just, it was one of those times where I'm between pods, should we say? So I'm looking to see anything else, and I see Yahoo NFL podcast. I went, oh, they were quite interesting. I'll listen to that. You can tell straight away that these are two people who are plugged in, who knew the stuff. From a podcasting point of view, it was two people who had genuine chemistry. We should try that. That obviously enjoyed the virtual time they spent in each other's company. Terez was a fabulous writer. He loved the game, and he loved writing about the game and talking about the game, and he always tried to get better at what he was doing. There's some YouTube videos from quite a few years ago now of him trying to explain some of the Chiefs passing concepts, and you can tell that it was probably in his infancy of being front and centre of the camera, because he gets the points across, but it's not particularly entertaining. Whereas as we spoke to Terez and you hear the podcast, you know that this man is a bundle of energy.
Yes.
In his own words, he brought the juice. Every time. It was different than with Wes, because while Wes was a shock, we knew he'd been ill.
Yes.
And I think in the back of our minds, we had to be almost prepared that this could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Terez, it's completely out of the blue. It was just one of those that you see it from an Adam Schefter account, and as much as it would be sick, you're praying it's a fake account and someone's just trying to play a sick joke. But then when you see it isn't, and it's similar with Wes, you see all these people coming out and saying, what he meant to them, and how generous he'd been with his time with all these disparate people. It's a tragic loss, especially as he was 37.
I was
younger than us.
Younger than us. I was going to highlight that, Neil. Yeah, he was younger than us.
We talk a lot about the Hall of Fame and how sometimes it's crusty old men around that table. He was the youngest Hall of Fame voter, so he's someone who's his experience of the game comes from watching. Not the likes of Norm Van Brocklin or Johnny Unitas, but of watching Michael Vick, LaDainian Tomlinson, these people who changed the game. So he was bringing that perspective to the Hall of Fame voting process. And, to lose him it's a tragedy for the game. It's a tragedy for all, the fans. A tragedy for anyone who enjoyed reading the stuff. I encourage everyone to find the piece that Charles Robinson wrote about Terez today. Because I say it was, their podcast. They were going to do one, I think it was today, and then they were going to have a 2-week break because they felt they needed the rest. And sadly, it's that podcast is never going to come again. So the only words I could say is I only spoke to him once. Would have liked to have spoke to him on countless occasions in the future.
Yes, absolutely.
But we're not going to get the chance. So I can only say, to echo words he used to end every podcast, peace.
Final one, Neil. Not someone who we know, but someone who is majorly involved in the NFL. More through my time watching than yours, as he drifted only at the start of yours, and that's Marty Schottenheimer, who passed away a few days ago. underlying health conditions related to dementia. For those who aren't aware of Marty and kind of hear the name Schottenheimer and think, oh my goodness, not Brian and his offensive schemes. Marty was a wonderful head coach. His success was rooted in what was known as Marty Ball, a conservative approach that featured a strong running game and tough defense, old school. He absolutely hated the Raiders and loved the mantra one play at a time, which he would shout to players all the time in pre-kickoff huddles. He has 205 wins as a head coach, 8th all time. And between 1984 and 2006, he reached the playoffs 13 times. Weirdly, I don't know if it's weirdly or just he's 5-18 in playoff games. You may, if for those who are not necessarily historians but aware of plays or types of situations, you will have heard of the drive. That was against Marty. You will have heard of the fumble. That was against Marty. And you probably will have remembered that the only time that everyone thought that that Phillip Rivers was going to win the Super Bowl, he then tore his Achilles tendon. That was under Marty.
Was Red Right 88 under Marty as well?
Yeah, I think so, probably. So if we look at his statistics, he took over the Browns in 84 when they were 1-7. He went 4-4 the rest of the year. By 1985, they won the AFC Central, and then obviously he went to 2 title games with them, the drive and the fumble. He took over the Chiefs in 88. They were 4-11-1. They were 8-7-1 in year 1 and 11-5 by year 2. He then took over Washington and went 8-8 in his first season. Was fired. He started 0-5. I can tell you why he got fired, according to Tony Kornheiser. He was an authoritarian. It was his way or the highway. One of Dan Snyder's mates and part owner, I can't remember the gentleman's name, used to come to practice on a bike, motorbike that is, and Marty told him that if he did it again, he would kind of break his bike up, which led to that guy telling Dan and Dan firing Marty Schottenheimer. Great move, by the way. He then took over the Chargers. He were 5-11 in 2001 before he took over. 8-8 in year 1, and by year 3 they were 12-4, and in 2006 went 14-2 and lost to the Patriots in the title game.
I think the impressive thing, obviously, about Marty Schottenheimer is you look at the record and the numbers, are staggering. Regular season wise, the boy was money. The shithouse headline that the Washington Post went with.
Horrific headline from what is usually a reputable newspaper, but yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, in case anyone is unaware of it, now that they've deleted it, was it Marty Schottenheimer, NFL coach whose teams wilted in the postseason, dies
age 77. I don't know why you say that. Anyway,
obviously someone as rooted in the game and for as long as he was around. We've seen in the past that there have been coaches who've been around for a long time and their coaching tree doesn't look particularly special. Well, I'm just going to reel off some of the coaches who worked under Marty Schottenheimer. Bruce Arians, I think he had some success recently. Cam Cameron, again, has had success in the league, been a successful offensive coordinator. Rob Chudzinski, same, short-lived, but has been a head coach in the league. Bill Cowher, who was his defensive coordinator with the Chiefs, obviously went on to the Steelers. Gunter Cunningham, Tony Dungy, Herm Edwards, Hugh Jackson, Mike McCarthy, Wade Phillips, Al Saunders, Art Shell, Tony Sperano, Mark Trestman. These all coached under Marty Schottenheimer. These all enjoyed some degree of success in the NFL, I think you could say.
Yeah.
And, it's unfortunate that he is almost the coaching equivalent of Dan Marino in the sense that he has the numbers, but people will ultimately judge him on the fact that he didn't win the big one. And as you point out, never even got to it.
It's one of those situations where, without going through each one individually, it's tough to understand. I think, his style of football could lead to the conservative approach, strong running game, tough defense can lead to tighter games, and in playoffs that may mean it doesn't go quite as well. If we look at the teams he had, I would never say he had, with the exception of possibly Rivers, he never had an elite quarterback. Or if he did, there was always a better one. So the 2 AFC title games he loses as the Browns, he's against John Elway. He loses the AFC title game with, the Gates, Rivers, LaDainian Tomlinson team against Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I understand that he lost a load of playoff games, but in certain situations when he had his best teams, he happened to lose to teams who were better. Oh look, there he is in 1988 with the Chiefs and taking over from that period of time and losing in playoffs. Around the same time, the Buffalo Bills kept going to all the Super Bowls. Sometimes you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and these things just have a habit of being that way. I look at someone like Andy Reid, and Andy Reid was great for the Philadelphia Eagles, but always found a way to not win. And it, just happened, and sometimes you didn't really understand it, or you'd be like, oh, well, there was always a better team. And, in theory, you look at it if you look at it from an Eagles point of view, he was probably only favoured in maybe two of those title games, maybe 3, and he won 1, which isn't as bad when you put it into the grand context of things. I think Marty Schottenheimer was a wonderful coach, and proven by the fact that a lot of people talk really highly of him, and you look at that coaching tree, it shows you that he was able to impart his knowledge onto other people, and also was able to understand what type of people needed to be coaches, and therefore they could be coaches going forward.
Yeah, it's sad, especially as he was, let's say, suffering from dementia in his final days, which, as we know, is a horrible way to go, especially for those around you. So he's someone, I say, who's I started watching the game, I say, in 2000. He was only coach for 5 seasons while I was there. Well, six if you count of the Washington one. But he's a name that is still going to be held up because of how long he was in the league and how successful he was. And ultimately, I say, it's like a Tim Henman syndrome. You're very good, but you're not good enough.
Yeah,
doesn't mean you're bad.
Absolutely, Neil. That's it for the show. We won't necessarily publicise what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks now, given what we've just discussed. We hope you've enjoyed this season. We're not going anywhere. We will continue to do shows, probably more bi-weekly than weekly going forward, as we head towards the draft and then as soon as the draft's over, it's straight into divisional previews and getting you all fantasy ready for 2021. Thank you all for listening, and these top guys are out.